everybody for coming out here this morning and taking time in your schedules to come and join the Rooster Talks. I've been an avid fan of these events. I think they're absolutely fabulous. And the Glove Factory as well is just such a little kind of hidden niche. So yeah, spread the word, spread the word. So, how to be a business athlete. And you know, Tom has alluded to my ultra running habit, which is a bit of a borderline obsession. And I do have this tendency to go and run up and down mountains for a long time. Though that is not what today is about. So how to be a business athlete. So when we kind of think of the word athlete, kind of what comes up? What do we kind of think about? What comes to mind? Energy. Oh, getting them in there at the beginning, love it. Primed, I think, definitely. What else? Madness? Whoa. Wafa, we're going to talk later. Sorry. Focused and determined. Focus is a big thing that we will touch on when we kind of go through. And training and having that kind of, that consistency and habits. Oh, I'll just go home now then, shall I? Resilience. Resilience buzzword in HR at the moment. Kind of if you're in HR, which I'm sure some of you probably are, it's kind of very much been on the trend in the last kind of year, and there's been lots of courses kind of popping up and around it. So business athletes. So how many in the room, just as curiosity, would describe yourself as an athlete? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No. And it's kind of one of those words that you kind of, ooh, athlete, what does that actually mean? And when you actually look it up in the dictionary, it's not particularly helpful. It's something about, being highly skilled or proficient at a sport and takes part in organised sports, which you're kind of like, oh, come on, it's a bit more than that. And I'd very much challenge that definition and encourage you all to kind of embrace it. We all have the scope to be an athlete. And actually, what can we take away by looking through our businesses with the lens of an athlete? What can that give us? Often we kind of get trapped very much in the business world. There's a certain way of doing things, and there's certain processes, there's certain systems, there's certain kind of cultural norms. And actually, yes, they're there for a reason, but sometimes when you're in that world and you have that group think, what does that then perpetuate? It's by stepping out and having a look through a different way that actually things open up and you kind of get new ideas and you maybe kind of become more productive and you may kind of improve your performance. So what can we learn from the sporting world? Okay, so you are my willing volunteers. Thank you so much in advance. No pressure. Not now, but at some point I'm going to ask you very kindly to throw the question out at me and then I will respond. Clearly there will be questions for you guys as you go along. It's all about kind of having a bit of a conversation with each other. So, how to be a business athlete. So what's the point of being a business athlete? Why would we even kind of contemplate it? When we look at the picture here, sink, float or swim, where are you? When it comes to your business, when it comes to life, are you sinking? Are you kind of bobbing around and floating? Or are actually you swimming? And this analogy comes from some research that was done in America across a group of businesses where they found that actually 14% of people felt as if they were sinking. They were in that crisis, burnt out, anxiety, literally just given up and were sinking. At the top end, you had the swimmers. What percentage do we reckon were the swimmers? 1, 2, little bit more. 10, a bit optimistic. So in the middle there, we've got 5% were the swimmers. So this is 5% of business owners turning up to work each day who are feeling energized, who are being fully in the zone, creative, who are able to inspire others and then go home at the end of the day and still have that energy to spend time with their family and to be able to kind of communicate and enjoy life. So the middle ground, the floaters, are whopping 81%. So that's kind of 81% of people kind of like bobbing around in the middle, just kind of a little bit helpless. Everything is happening to them, a total lack of control, and just overwhelmed, ultimately. So these statistics are kind of quite frightening, and I'm sure that we've all experienced it. A lot of people here, you'll all be kind of business owners. You may work on your own, you may have small teams, you may be at the very, very beginning of your business setting it up, you may be kind of in the middle, things are kind of gaining momentum and gaining ground, or you may ultimately be at the end. But actually, the common thread throughout is actually there are times when it's tough out there. You're constantly on. How do you manage that and ultimately set yourself up so that you kind of eke out your own space? And this is where the business athletic model kind of comes into play to kind of pull things together. But before I say any more, it's time for question 1.
I was going to say, it's great to start with that.
Yeah.
What's the secret behind embracing an athletic mindset and achieving peak performance?
Perfectly timed. Thank you so much for asking. I really appreciate your question. So what is the secret? How do you kind of break it down? Start thinking about athletes. Okay, so how do athletes work? How do they live? How do they train? What can I take that back into my business? How can I kind of engage all my senses rather than just thinking my way out of everything, which often isn't the way. We get very sidetracked by our primary skill. And I'm sure we've got an amazing range of businesses in the room where you have your skill, be it that in the technical world, be that in the marketing world, be that in the communications world, and we focus on that. It's the secondary skills, it's that bedrock that sets us up for success for our primary skill. If you haven't got the basics, then how can you carry out that primary skill, whatever it is, to the full performance that it could be? So this is where I kind of started stripping it back to basis. Okay, so when you're an athlete, you're bringing everything in. We're talking about our minds, we're talking about our hearts, we're talking about our body, and we're talking about the social. So it's this very big, broad fundamentals, bringing them all together, and they all kind of cross over and complement each other. So this is when I was kind of starting to break it down. Where do you start? What is the most important? Out of all of these, what triggers everything? And that was a question from me out to you guys. Hello? Yeah, start at the heart. So question 2.
So the business world doesn't have time or space for emotions. How does this fit?
Yeah, but with business, serious world, and actually acknowledging their emotions and speaking about them is a massive big hurdle. It's a scary thing, putting it out there. It's having that level of vulnerability. But ultimately, as business owners, it's having that passion. It's having that purpose that pulls everything together. And this is why I just like you all to kind of take a moment and think about the businesses that you're in. You know, what drives it? What is your passion? What is your purpose? What service or offering or product are you sharing ultimately to make the world a better place? So just take a couple of minutes. If you've not met the person next to you yet, introduce yourself, say hi, smile. I know it's early on a Friday morning, but we can do that. And just have a bit of a conversation. Thank you. So, emotions linked to our purpose. And this is where I kind of take a bit of a step to the running thing. And indulge me, this is one of my indulgent ultra running stories that I gave myself permission to talk about. So clearly ultra running is a little bit of a strange sport. And I kind of lived in the world, so it's my normal. But for most people, kind of going and running for maybe 25, 30, 40 hours isn't something that you'd probably really want to do. Throw in maybe, I don't know, the desert or mountains, it makes it sound even more barking strange. How can I explain this kind of passion that I have for it? How do I articulate the feeling that I get when I'm out in the mountains and I'm in that zone, in that moment of flow, and everything just feels absolutely perfect? It falls into place, I'm in my rhythm, I'm breathing, I'm soaking up the environment. It's just pure bliss for me. Is there an element of escapism that I'm kind of away from the rest of the world and everything else? Probably, yes, I'll admit that. Though it gives me, in a way, it distills down, it's so simple. The aim is to get to the end. How can I get to the end as fast as possible? And this picture here, I think this encapsulates it for me. And this is my screensaver on my computer at the moment, so do pray indulge me. And the picture, that expression of happiness, as I crossed that finish line, everything had fallen into place. And this is the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. You may have heard about it. It's one of the famous walking routes out in the French Alps. It takes walkers maybe 7 to 10 days to walk it. It took me 28 and a half hours to run it. So, and the reason I kind of pull this back is that for me, competing at this level within the ultra running world on the kind of the global scene, it takes a lot amount of consistency and energy as an athlete. Though I have to say, coming back to it, we'll come back to stories and mindset further down, getting to it, it's a lot about getting over the physical and the mental barriers, and how do you set it up? And it's having that passion and that purpose and coming back to that. That is what drives you when times are tough. That is what absolutely gives you that fuel to get over the barriers. And it's not always like that. You don't always have that elation. You may see the other picture, little broken Anna on the side, totally different story, completely battered. This was another race, another stupid race, running down Gran Canaria. I'm sure people have probably been on holiday there and sat on a beach. Far more sensible than running from La Playos down to Maspalonas. So this race was 125k, took me about 17 hours, starts at 11 o'clock at night, utterly antisocial time to start a race. I know, you've kind of been through the day, everyone else has been out Friday night, and you're about to start a race that you know is going to take an awfully long time. 8 kilometres into that race, and you're running down this kind of very rocky, steep stream bed, I literally tripped, totally face planted, and, you know, I was lying there, little kind of sparrows above my head. And, you know, the emotion that comes through, I trained for months and months and months and months and months. And this had happened. My knee blew up nice and cut. So how do you deal with that emotion? How do you deal with the upsets that life throws at you? And for me, it was, yes, a bit of a power sob, I won't lie, by the side of the road. Then it was dusting myself down and getting back on with it. And it hurt. And it hurt for the next probably about 18 hours. But I got to the finish line. And it's bringing that back to the business world. Okay, there are emotions. You may put all your energy, all your drive, everything into one deal, and then it may blow up. What do you do? How do you get over that? How do you manage your emotions? Because a lot of time it's about managing those emotions. So that's why when I kind of was pulling the little model together, it's the purpose, that's what drives you. It's the emotions, they come from it, that's what you attach to it. But the emotions, they go up and they down. How do you control them? And a lot of times we kind of think, oh, so our emotions, that's what happens to us. We have nothing we can do, it's out of our control. Whereas actually, what can you do? What strategies can you employ to work through them? To use your emotions to your advantage and to talk about them as well. A lot of times within business, it is hard. And you may be kind of bottling everything up and not speaking about it and kind of, I've got this. I'm responsible for a team. I can't show my emotions. And how do you show that vulnerability? How do you kind of open up? So ultimately, you're from the, it's from the heart. It's genuine. It's real.
You've got to create that space for people to be able to feel vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's opening up that kind of having that willingness to do that conversation and how ready you are to do that. Because not everybody might be. Some emotions are big, scary things. I know for me, I was in the army for 9 years. Take a step back, and I'm in the army. Army, very much hierarchical, process-driven. It's all about the task. People, so actually through that transition of going from a military way of doing things to, working for myself and competing as an athlete, it's been a journey of kind of getting to know myself, getting to know my emotions, because ultimately that is what gives you that drive. So that's where we all started off, where we started, emotions, the heart. So what next? What next? The mind over matter. Ultra running, insert other sport or activity, is 90% mental and the rest is in your head. So this is where where's question three? Question three, who have we got?
We all have our favourite stories.
Yeah. Stories. Oh, we all like stories. As human beings, it's how we kind of make sense of the world. And it's that kind of fine line between the stories that we tell ourselves and reality and truth. And actually, what do we see? What do we remember? What do we pay attention to? Because often it's the stories that we're telling ourselves, that's what we believe. But actually, where does the basis of those stories come from? What do we tell ourselves about our past, which may be founded kind of, 10, 20, 30 years ago? Actually, what fragment of that is actually now real? But how much control does it exert over your body and what you actually do? And actually, a lot of the time for athletes, it's a story that they're telling themselves. How do they create that story that they are an athlete? Where did they actually come from? What has influenced their past? Because ultimately, that's who makes you in the present, and that's going to shape who you are in the future. So as an athlete, the story that I was telling myself, oh dear Lord, there's a lot of them. And you could cherry pick, and I just kind of invite you to reflect back on your life. What story have you told yourself about your life? in your business, what story do you tell? How did it come about? What kind of business owner are you in your head? What story? Because ultimately that is what kind of plants the seeds. That's a story. And appealing to your audience, to your market, they love stories. So what stories are you sharing? So just like you, before I share my story, just to talk to somebody else, kind of turn the other way. Again, big smile. Hi, and my story is. Go for it. No, I love it. The fact that people are moving, getting around different people, that's what it's all about, kind of thing. Having a bit of conversation and getting to know people. So thank you for sharing your stories. Once upon a time. So this is part of my story, and it is always only a part of a story. Clearly, we all kind of interpret our stories and make what we will of them. And it comes down to that focus and that choice as well. What focus are we putting on our stories? What are we choosing to tell ourselves as a story? So this could be like one of the stories. It's part of many stories. This was a picture of my dad. He was a fell runner back in the 80s. And it's one of those stories that's like, oh, well, if you know, my dad was a fell runner, clearly I must be an athlete, has to be an athlete. You know, it's in my genes, clearly, it'd be rude not to. Whereas actually, how often would we take that as a story? That's kind of like quite a positive story. So clearly that's not the story that I think about. I'd say that this is probably more the story that I kind of would have held on to. So Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Barnett, God bless them. Yeah, good old teaching in the Northeast. Love it. Thank you very much, Church High. Anna Marie has little interest in team sports and has difficulty catching a ball. That is still true, I have to say. Anna Marie is rather timid during PE lessons and needs to develop her self-confidence. Okay, thanks for that. So these two words, these two sentences, how many words? What influence can that have on you moving forwards? And I held on to that for years and years and years and years and years. I was crap at sports. My brother, he was the sporty one. I was the kind of conscientious one. And that's a label that I wore and that I played out in my life. And actually, having that, what good did that do me to develop as an athlete? And you can transpose that back into the business world. Okay, so within your business, you can label and say, oh, well, because back at maths, I had a rubbish maths report, but I can't do anything to do with numbers. And you put these limiting beliefs on yourself just because of maybe something that somebody said in the past that maybe you've interpreted completely wrong, but you've held on to, you've owned it, you've given it life. So how can you put that aside and ultimately focus on one thing? So, that was my kind of teenage years growing up. Maybe, my 20s, it could have been like a little bit better and, shifted it coming through. So what happened? Meh, not quite. Yes, went to university. Clearly going to university, not great for my health. Manchester University, a fair amount of enjoying myself, shall we say, went on. And then I joined the army. Everyone has this image that the army is like you're super fit, really healthy, can do everything. Not for me, it wasn't, no, living in Germany in the officers' mess, which is a bit like going to university, but you get paid, so it's even more dangerous. And then they send you on holiday, courtesy of you good taxpayers, to Afghanistan and Iraq for 6 months at a time. Brilliant. Again, not great for the development of an athletic mindset. So at what point did I kind of forget about this and become an athlete? How did I move into this? And it's almost within like any career. At what point do you make that transition from being, a trainee to, I'm a solicitor kind of thing, or developing, training as an architect to being that architect? And it's owning that. At what point do you go from like playing at business to actually being a serious business owner and taking it seriously? And I know that when I kind of came back from Saudi Arabia to the Southwest, I'd kind of, had a few clients on the side. I'd done a little bit of interim work, a couple of project-based things, and actually taking that plunge to like, actually, I'm going to be a business owner. I'm setting up my business. My business is Reach for More. I specialize in performance coaching. I love taking clients outdoors for walking and talking conversations. That was a big kind of step. And actually that transition into the business world, how do you move through that? How do you get that confidence from actually starting out as an embryonic, I've kind of got this idea, it's really cool, I want to share it with the world, to, right, I'm doing it, and let people come with me. So stories, all about the stories. And ultimately, if your story is not serving you at this moment, how can you change it? You have the power to edit that story, which is in your head, and choose what you want it to be. So it kind of comes down to that choice. So what's your story? So think about that as you kind of go off. What is your story? What do you want your story to be? How could your story change to support you within your business moving forwards? Right, focus. And we had focus brought up by someone at the beginning as what it is with an athlete. It's that focus in the zone in that moment. This, once again, please indulge me, another ultra running analogy. Clearly I'm looking very focused there, in the zone. So this you might have heard of as the Marathon des Sables. Very stupid race running across the Sahara Desert, equivalent of 6 marathons in 6 days. It's actually about to start this weekend, so you've missed it for this year, sorry. But if you want to do it next year, put it on your wish list of things to do. So what makes it even stranger, I did this back in 2015 and then had the opportunity to go again last year. So rather than just doing it once, I was like, yay, let's go back for more fun and do it again. So this is me second time round. Not feeling the love quite so much. Though ultimately it was that focus that got me through. And sometimes it is bringing it back to one step at a time. And when you're thinking about ultra running, it's a big, scary thing, 125 kilometers, 6 marathons in 6 days, 160 kilometers. How do you make sense of that? And the same within the business world. There is so much that you need to do, so much to get your head around, so many different within the business side of things, but then there's the behind the scenes administration as well, which often you don't really want to do and it kind of gets left behind. So how do you focus? How do you narrow it down? And it very much comes down to that moment. What can you do in that one moment? Okay, ultra running wise, I can take one step. Dink. And it's one step closer to the finish line. Within the business world, okay, I can do one thing. What is it? It's one step forward. And it's when we get distracted, that is when everything can kind of go a little bit pear-shaped. And let's be honest, we kind of live in a world where there are a lot of distractions that are going on. Whether they are real or whether they're virtual or whether they're in our mind, we are constantly being pulled in so many different ways. And that's the thing, it's drawing that athletic mind, it's bringing it back, it's focusing in that moment. What is my action now? What's that one thing? Link it back to your purpose as well. It needs to make sense, it needs to drive that bigger goal. So bringing it back to that focus. And there's loads of different strategies that you can do. I know when I'm running, it kind of comes down to that basic, if things are getting really tough, it's the counting game, which is really fun. And I can only go from 1 to 20, because if I go beyond 20, I lose count, so I have to come back again. So 1 to 20, repeat for about 6 or 8 hours. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little bit sadistic. I'm really selling ultra running, aren't I? But ultimately, it's a choice. I choose to do it. I choose to be there. We all choose to be business owners. And yes, there are times when I'm like, oh my God, I've just totally had enough. I want to throw the towel in. Let's go back to being employed. I'll go back to being in the army. I got a check at the end of the month. It was kind of cozy. I just had to do what I was told. And then I think, never, no way, not a chance in hell. I'm going to keep my lessons and be out here as a business owner. And I'm sure that there's all that element, that drive where you will love working for yourself and being able to have that element of flexibility. So it comes back to that choice. What do you choose? Where do you choose to put your attention? Where do you choose to focus? So it's all about the mind, and it is that mind over matter. Doing well against the sounds of the cafe in the background. Can you hear them all rumbling on? Focus, that's what it's all about. Okay, so moving on. Where's my final person? Who was my final person? What was the question?
My brain powers my business. What relevance does the rest of my body have?
Yeah, I know, I forgot to have. Had to put that in there. I was like, oh, printed it out, put it onto the end. Yeah. So ultimately, we're in business. It's all about our brain. It's our brains that are powering our business. It's our thinking capacity that moves everything forward. We do kind of like to think sometimes that it is our brains that is fueling everything, though actually the way that our entire body works, they complement each other. But we do kind of forget that sometimes, and it's all just about the brain. I can think my way out of this. I can rationalize everything. Okay, so what about the bigger body? And I know there is so much advice out there, and so much of it is conflicting. When you're thinking about nutrition, movement and recovery, it can all kind of get a bit confusing. And I basically pair it back to that athletic mindset. Okay, so as an athlete, everything that I put into my body, everything that I do with my body It is about nourishing it. It's about looking after it, ultimately. So when I am running, I can be the best that I can be. I can perform the best that I can be. Okay, so as a business owner, my muscle is my brain, and I know that the brain isn't a muscle biologically, but we can kind of use that metaphor because it's really kind of about 80 billion neurons. Though you kind of get my drift. But ultimately, we want to be looking after what is inside us. How can we fuel it? How can we make sure it's hydrated? How can we make sure that it's rested so ultimately that it can do what it needs to do, that it can be super creative? And actually, a lot of the times when it comes to our brain, we're just kind of pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And this is where I'm going to start off. I think it's getting louder back there. Something's about to take off. I'm going to start with the recovery. And the recovery is one of the things that me as an athlete, I'm not great at. Me as a business owner, I'm pretty rubbish at. And it's something that is kind of constantly work in progress. And we do, as an athlete, you think about an athlete, and we were talking about their training program. An athlete's training program is basically periods of stress on the body interspersed with periods of recovery. So you have that exercise period, and be that something to do with building endurance, building speed, building muscle, then you recover. And ultimately, it's in the recovery which is where you get stronger, because you've fatigued that muscle, you've actually damaged the muscle fibers, they then repair themselves within the period of recovery, get my words out, to actually become stronger. So actually, it's that period of recovery is so important within the programming. And I know that when I started running, first of all, I just run. Little bit, runners like running, no structure at all. And it wasn't until I worked with a coach that he reined me back in and actually put rest days into my program. And that gave me permission to rest because someone else was telling me, put your feet up, eat properly, hydrate. Without that, I would have been like, I'll just put my trainers on and go out for another run kind of thing. But it was that recovery. And actually, it's been since then. I've been working with him now for, 6 years. I've got stronger season on season, year on year. And it's that long-term aim, which is what we're looking at. Okay, so taking that into the business world, how can we translate that? When we look at our schedules, they can get a little bit crazy, a little bit back-to-back, not much gap. And literally it'll be meeting, task, meeting, task, meeting, task, meeting, task, meeting. And you look and you have this outlook overwhelm that how do you actually work around that? How can you actually do your job? How can you actually think? Because you're bouncing between so much stuff. How can you actually eke out that space for the recovery? Your brain gets fatigued. It needs to rest. How can you implement bits of recovery within our day? I know it's hard. We all want more time. But let's be honest, if I magically gave you another 2 hours a day, you'd still want more time. It's kind of one of those things that you're never kind of quite going to have enough of. Okay, so how can we use it the best that we possibly can? How can we factor in that recovery? So that's kind of like recovery through the day to nurture our brain. Then there's overnight as well, sleep. And it's setting yourself up in the evening to sleep as much as possible. And athletes sleep a lot. Hands up, total duvet monster. I will sleep for hours and hours and hours and hours. And it's my body needs the recovery. If I'm battering it, running up and down mountains for hours on end, it needs chance to decompress and to recover. So sleep is absolutely key. And this is where I'm going to do my top tips of my books, what to read. If you've not read this book, Matt Walker, Why We Sleep, read it. Really, really quite eye-opening and scary, and delves into how we think about sleep and actually what greater impact does that have. It's almost become like a badge of honor within some businesses that to not sleep, walking in, I pulled an all-nighter all night. And actually last night, and what is that? And then what impact is then that having on, yes, the way that we function the following day, but also on our health and our longer-term health as well. And ultimately, we want to be healthy. We need to be healthy. We're business owners. And if I have a day off and I can't work, there ain't no money coming in. So it's about keeping my entire body healthy. And ultimately, I want to be able to serve my clients the best that I can be. My entire body needs to be healthy to do that. Okay. Matt Walker. He also has a few if you Google him, some video clips, some good just to get a little bit of audio. Try before you buy and all that. So recovery. Cannot stress recovery enough. Right, how am I doing for time? I'm all good. Can get a little bit carried away sometimes, and I don't want you to be here until 10 o'clock, so we're going to be walking. Yeah. Okay, so recovery. I think I've laboured the point. Laboured it a little bit more. Okay, so movement and nutrition, and it kind of comes back to we all know we should move a bit more, we all know we should do this and that, and nutrition, I kind of know what I should be doing. And it's like a lot of the stuff we kind of know, it's that translating into the doing, and then it kind of actually being embedded as an actual habit. And that's the thing, as an athlete, yes, I move a lot, I have my training sessions, but it's also just the moving. It's going to things like yoga, kind of nice and stretchy bendy, or doing a bit of kind of coordination. So, or just even getting up from your desk and going for a walk, so you haven't been sat in this position for 10 hours. And whatever strategies work for you. We can only really focus for an hour or 90-minute blocks. How do you chunk your day? How do you get a bit of movement in? How do you ensure that you're kind of fueling your body? And ultimately, it kind of comes back to Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Success is not an action, but a habit. And that's the thing. There is no kind of big one thing that you can do. Athletes do this consistently, day in, day out. They make sure they get their sleep, they eat. They get their sleep, they sleep, and they recover. So it's over time. It's not over a day, it's not over a week, it's not over a month. It's over years and years and years of training. So it's adopting that mindset, and yes, it comes back to mindset of how can you set your life up so that you're looking over your body. We only have one body in life. We often don't notice it until something goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, it's often too late. So I very much invite you to look after yourselves, to look after your business, because it is very much connected, that wider well-being. Okay. Last one. What was the last one? What was the last part? Social. I knew you'd remember that one. The social queen. Thank you, Wafa. Sorry, sidetrack. Wafa is my lovely net walking partner. So we kind of take groups out and do little net walks around in Bradford-on-Avon, Bath and Devizes, and we will share a little bit more about that later. So Wafa is extremely social, whereas I'm more of a classic introvert and like to hide. Oh, come on. Okay, so this was just a little diagram I threw in, about what's happened with our body when we're kind of training it. So you get a stimulus, so your level of fitness, and this is what I kind of link back into the business world. You have a stress at any one point. So you see the dotted line at the bottom, that is when we are doing too much. We're putting our body under too much stress. We're not giving ourselves enough time to recover. And ultimately, we are fatigued and we never actually improve our level of fitness, which kind of comes up to the top of the graph. The solid line in the middle, that is when we're kind of getting the balance right. Yes, we've got a period of recovery, and then it's improving our fitness. And then the line one, the little dotted lines, that's when we're not putting enough stress on our body, we're not training enough, and ultimately the level of fitness is not improving. So it's all about getting that balance, and it's a test and balance when it kind of comes to training. And it's the same within your business. If you're working your brain too hard, you're not going to be able to use it kind of any better. It's just, you're just kind of fatiguing yourself and you're staying longer in that kind of period of fatigue. So it's getting that balance right, but then you don't want to be not using back too much because then you're not developing yourself. So it's just bringing the theory of kind of overcompensation, overload, which is very much behind training and how you plan a program into the business world and what can we take back from that. And it just links into the recovery piece. Okay. So we'll now go on to social. So the final side of it, it's all about kind of the social and kind of pulling it together. And athletes, very much, you may just see that one person up at the front. And it's particularly if it's like a solo sport, be that swimming, or be that running, or be that, I know, some form of gymnastics or something, you just see that one person. And yes, ultra running is a very isolated one-person sport, though it's all about having that team. It's that community that kind of pulls everything together. It's that tribe. Who is your tribe? So within your business, you know, who is your tribe? Working on your own as a solopreneur or an entrepreneur or a consultant, it can be kind of quite lonely. So how do you build those connections? Who is your community? And then how do you contribute to that community? And it's very much not just that community in person, it is very much virtual as well. But it's having that support network that really gives you that piece. Coming forward. So it's not just about you and what you can take from the community, it's what can you give back as well. So it all links together, and it's very much about having those social bonds that kind of moves everything forwards. So again, ultra running may seem a very lonely sport, whereas actually I pull so much from the people who support me. I could not do what I do without my coach, without my husband, without the team that I represent and all the different support. And it's the same with all of you as business owners. You can't do it alone. We often like to think that we can. And often asking for help can be like the biggest, scariest thing, but actually kind of going, actually, I'm stumped. I don't know what I'm doing. How do I work through that? And often it's getting out of ourselves, getting beyond yourself and asking for that support. Because ultimately, if someone asked you for help, what would you do? You'd be there in a flash, kind of thing. We love to help, we love to support. So think about kind of the social and the community. So this is how it kind of all pulls together. This is how you can draw lessons of, okay, so from the athlete world back into your business world. So just one final question before we go. We have got time. Working through the different areas that we have today and just thinking across your life, what is the area that you think you're currently potentially neglecting and has the biggest bang for the buck if you kind of focus on? What is something that you can do, that you can take away, that will ultimately make you a business athlete to support your business? So find somebody that you've not met. So this is the third conversation, third person. Networking is going well today. Again, big smile, say hi, and just, have a conversation. All right then, thank you very much. And hopefully everybody has identified one thing that links back to the heart of it all that ultimately will support your business. And that's what it is. It's coming back. It's having that athletic mindset, thinking about all the different areas. Okay, so what would an athlete do? How does it support the athlete? Okay, I'm a business athlete. How is this supporting my business? And that's what it comes down to. Your attitude to the mind, the heart, the body, and the social. There is no quick fix, sorry. It's all about consistency over time. And it's those small choices, those small decisions, those habits that become ingrained again and again and again and again and again. But often this is just a really useful way of stepping outside your business world. We get very trapped within our worlds, and actually by taking a step outside and having a bit of a reflect, what can I do differently? Because ultimately that is when you make changes and when you move forward. So I'd just like to encourage you to commit to whatever you were going to do. Thank you so much for taking the time out and indulging me in sharing a few stories about my ultra running escapades and linking it back to the business world, because ultimately that is what it's all about. Hopefully you've been able to glean some little nugget or something that just shifts the way that you look at the world, or there's some fact that you can take away which supports you. That's what it's all about this morning. It's about you and your business. So thank you very much. I would love it if you have time, and totally appreciate you've already given up like an hour of your Friday morning, and I'm sure things are kind of, the email is kind of calling. But if you do have time to come for a stroll through the fields to Great Charnfield with a few questions to kind of unpack this a little bit further, that would be fabulous. If not, have a great day, and thank you so much. If you would like to continue the conversation or have a vague interest in this rather crazy events that I do, I'm on kind of Instagram and Twitter, and I do link it back and share things that I read. I'm very passionate about performance and how can I improve my performance, and it comes down to the very holistic body. So I do share certain resources and signpost them, so if you are keen to kind of follow, that would be absolutely fantastic. There are little cards around. Clearly I do love taking people outdoors, and this is just like a little quote, a little ray of what heading outdoors can do. I do the most of my work outside rather than being stuck indoors, and I just think it combines a lot of the movement and drawing inspiration from nature as well, and it has a very different relationship from being sat opposite somebody to walking side by side. It just kind of deepens the level of communication, so that's what I love to do. So thank you very much.